this for later. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us today for our second in our 4-day series of Technology Week. Tonight, we are going to talk about the IT list or the IT list, and this is all about policies that your library should have regarding IT technology. And our fearless leader, Miss Gail Santy, is going to lead us through that. I will just let you know that if I get background noise, I may mute you. But if you have a question, feel free to unmute yourself. I'm just trying to keep the distracting noise to a minimum, so don't get offended. A couple of cleanup things. Don't forget that we have 2 more technology sessions this week, both at 1:30 on Wednesday and Thursday. Tomorrow we will be doing Let's Get Digital, where Michael Adamic will be going through Hoopla and Sunflower eLibrary. He will be able to demonstrate how to use those apps on your phone and how to set up accounts for patrons. And then on Thursday, we will be having lightning rounds where we will have 4 sessions, about 12 minutes long. We will go over the new Patron catalog app. And then Michael will also go over the help site for Aspen Discovery, which is the new Patron catalog. And Andy will go over TechSoup, where you can get discounted software for your library. That means Microsoft Office Suite for $36. So that's very important. And then Liz will go over some cool apps. So she'll end the whole session with some cool apps. Elizabeth Duclos there, she was waving, she's our cataloger. And don't forget, next week on the 26th is our Explorers group, Explore the Questions That Matter. It will be at the La Crosse High School. Patty will be leading that, but what the goal is for librarians, school librarians, public librarians, library staff, anybody related to libraries, all to come and talk about the issues that you want to talk about. CKLS will have some discussion starting questions, but what we really hope is that you come and lead the discussion the way you want to go, and CKL steps back and lets you take it where you need to. So that real quick. Thank you. So there we go. Gail, I think we're all ready for you.
Okay, I'm going to start sharing the screen and get right down to this. I know the answers to all these questions. What I'm hoping is that you will unmute yourself and chime in with what you think the answers are, or at the very least, discuss amongst yourselves, for those of you who are with a group, what you think the answers might be. Because while I know what the answers are, you might have a different answer for your library. Okay, let's go. And just a minute. And I need to go back. How did that happen? Okay. Can you see the very first slide says the IT list policies?
Yes.
All right. Welcome to Technology Week. Tonight is for trustees. If you like this format, be sure and let us know, because we can make it happen again for you next year. We're going to talk about policies tonight. That is one of your most important jobs as library trustees. And if you've ever attended trustee training with your CKLS trainers, you know that policies guide the daily operation of the library, and they help the decision-making of the library director and any library staff you may have. Policies provide the framework for library operations and services. Carefully developed policies can help ensure high-quality, consistent library service that provides for your community needs, good use of resources, and this is an important one, especially in the technology policies, fair treatment of library staff and library users. Okay. So this is the list of technology related policies your library should have in place. We're going to go through each one of those, so I'll just let you read through these briefly. Tech plan, replacement schedule, You know you have a donations policy, but we also need to talk about donations of technology, Kansas SIPA, filtering, social media, staff using library equipment for personal use, patron devices, and internet acceptable use. I know we've said it, but I want you to jump in anytime. You can type a question in the chat or unmute yourself and you can talk. So the reason for a technology plan is that it outlines the library's goals for using technology to achieve the library's goals, missions, and objectives. If you don't have goals, missions, and objectives, you really don't know why you need technology. The technology plan will also address the library's current inventory of software and computer equipment, and that's just a list, perhaps with the serial numbers. And the technology plan also helps you plan for any future purchases, replacement, and for maintenance. Your current technology might include your network, your integrated library system, which is for most of you Pathfinder Central, computers, printers, copiers, any technology that doesn't circulate to patrons, any that does circulate. Should also include your goals, your budget, staff training, and an evaluation. That sounds pretty formal, but this is as simple as a budget and as complicated as a budget needs to be. If you have Microsoft licenses, 5 computers, you know that every 5 years, you're going to replace a staff computer, you're going to replace other computers, and here's your total budget. If you're a smaller library, your budget's going to look a lot different than this, but it really doesn't need to be more complicated than this. Okay. We talk about library donations all the time. We talk about the books we get that came from grandma's attic or from Uncle Joe's garage, the National Geographics that someone has been saving since the 50s, the encyclopedias that are old and no longer effective, no longer in date as well. But we haven't really talked a lot about accepting donations of technology. And I think it's something that's important to talk about because without this little bit hooked into your donation policy, you're going to get donations from well-meaning people who assume that older materials are something that the library would want to add. The answer to that is no, you don't want that. And so here's a really good phrase. It's the library has limited capacity to accept donations. We will only accept donations of material published in the past 10 years. If it's in good condition, we will not accept any of the following. So you can see that what we've just done here is added computer games and software, computers, e-readers, and other electronic items right to the library's regular donation policy. So this is a real quick, easy addition to your donation policy already. You should be able to whiz right through that one in one night in a board meeting. And then you're well on your way to getting these policies in place. The Kansas Children's Internet Protection Act, we call it SIPA, is required by law. That's why you need this policy. Every public library needs this policy. You're required to comply with it. Every public library, and I think it's every 3 years, has to send a copy of their minutes that show that they've adopted SIPA as a policy. They have to send that to the state librarian when they're doing their annual survey. And sometimes that can catch up on you. But if you don't have a true SIPA policy, your best source for information here is going to be the Kansas State Library. This site offers a brief summary of the law, links to the law, the permanent regulation. The best part is a policy template. You just download it and you add your own library's information and it's done. And then also possible filtering options. The email to submit your policy to the State Library of Kansas, which is required every year, is on this same web page. Andy, can you talk real quick about any filtering that CCALS might help with?
So what we normally do for the smaller libraries and medium-sized libraries is use something called OpenDNS filtering, which is a free way to block explicit content and illegal downloads, but no filtering is perfect. So also in the SIPA on that website, it says an acceptable form of filtering is just or at least it used to say this. An acceptable form of filtering is just visual inspection. But it's easy for me to add OpenDNS, and that way you don't have to supervise every single second of someone's use. But we do have issues. People can get around it. That's just the way the internet is. If someone looks hard enough, they can find whatever they want.
That's right. Andy, is there a cost for libraries?
No.
Okay. And if they're interested in that, they should get in touch with you?
Yes. And I can show them how to check to make sure the filter is working and all that kind of fun stuff too.
Excellent. Thank you. So we're going to talk about filtering in adult patrons because it goes right along with that. Supreme Court Chief Justice Rehnquist, in a 2003 decision in United States versus American Library Association, noted that sometimes filters will inadvertently block access to forms of expression that are legal and constitutionally protected. In order to use the internet for bona fide research or other lawful purposes, the library may turn off the filter at a public computer upon the request of an adult user. That's an over 18 user. The library may also unblock a particular website upon request after the library determines that the website does not contain obscene content, child pornography, or content deemed harmful to minors. In the event the library disables the filter, the user is still prohibited from accessing content that is prohibited by this policy. So filtering in adult patrons, the reason for this policy is because blocking all access to protected speech can lead to litigation and legal fees. And again, when an adult patron encounters a blocked site, he only needs to ask the librarian or she to unblock it if they are an adult. And that's something that Andy can also walk your librarian through, or can walk you through if you're the librarian. Do we have any questions yet?
I had, this is Mary Beth, and I had one question about their library's current status on the SIPA submission to the state library. Your annual report has a question, I think it's 13
way down at the bottom. Yeah.
Way down at the bottom, and it asks for when the last time you turned that in. When Jeff Hickson was at the state library, he pre-filled that. And so we will know the last time it was submitted within 3 years. So if you don't know and you can't remember, contact me and I can look that up for you.
Yes. Yes. And if you don't have it, it used to be that the state library would be very quick to remind you. I'll bet they still are, but I'm not positive. Okay. Staff, patrons, and social media. The reason for this policy is multifold. It's so that library staff don't misuse or misrepresent the library on social media channels. And it's to inform your patrons about their responsibilities and what they're agreeing to when they go on to the library's social media channels. And by channels, I mean Instagram, Twitter, Facebook's the big one for most of us. Good wording for this policy is that the library will utilize social media tools to encourage community involvement and to create a dialogue between the library and its patrons regarding services, resources, events and programs, and community information. This is an important one here. The library doesn't endorse, no, advertisements on social media are not endorsed by the library. Now, what do you think about comments and posts and messages by patrons on social media? Well, social media is not a public forum. It's a private forum, and it's not managed by library staff. So a good policy is that comments, posts, and messages are allowed on the library's social media as long as they conform to the library's social media policy. That way, then, if someone is passing on to a friend that there's going to be a great program at the library on Thursday night and they want to be sure to register or they want to be sure to show up, that's certainly the kind of message that you want. Those sorts of sharings are great. But if you're having something that someone in your community might not want to happen in the community, and there's any number of things that could be, if they post negatively on the library site, what's the library's response going to be? Is the librarian going to respond to it? Is the librarian going to take that post down? The library staff need these policies so they know how to respond to positive and to negative interactions with your patrons. So a good one to put there is that by commenting and posting on library-hosted social media sites, users agree to the library's social media policy. And here's a very clever wording. All content posted to sites maintained by the library is subject to the library's rules of conduct. So if someone started using foul language on your Facebook page, those posts could be deleted because they're not in accordance with your library's rule of conduct. Also, individuals who violate the library's social media policy may be banned from the library's social media sites and/or facilities, and authorities may be contacted. This ties right back into your patron behavior policy or your library code of conduct, whatever you call it, because they're considering that your social media is an extended place. So personal use of library equipment by library staff. I think this is a necessary policy. Library staff need clear standards for the appropriate use of your technology resources, and they need to be held accountable for ethical and lawful use and help mitigate risk. Now, what that mitigate risk means is we're talking about cybersecurity here. And we're talking about other things like secure computing and password management. I know that Mary Beth and Andy often have to go to libraries and clean up computers, and they've got a bunch of adware or coupon savers or things like that. That library obviously doesn't have a personal use of library equipment by library staff policy. So what this needs to address is what the appropriate use would be, what unauthorized uses would be. Are they allowed to install software or modify their work computers for personal use? Are they allowed to use the internet and email for personal use? Or it can even talk about personally owned devices. And this is a little bit tricky because most of our librarians use their own phones, and they are taking pictures of events and they were posting to events on Facebook with their own phone. Is that something that the library board has authorized? This is something that your librarians are much more likely to encounter, and that is patron devices and staff. So the reason for this policy is liability. The first question that your staff should ask a patron, if you're going to authorize them to touch patron devices, is the patron really the rightful owner of this device? Or is it their mothers or their sisters or their brothers? It's important to set boundaries between library staff and patrons. This policy does that. What it does is it lets your patrons know what staff can and cannot do. They can help patrons get started on the internet. They can offer some assistance. They're not able to do any sort of in-depth training on a laptop or a tablet or even on using the computer. And they can't recommend any commercial site over another. And they can't perform commercial transactions. They can't fill out your taxes. They can't file your insurance or your unemployment claim for you. Mary Beth, go ahead.
What about touching a patron's device?
It used to be a little more common. Staff should not touch a patron's device. And the reason for that, again, is simple liability. If the staff person sneezes and drops it and breaks it, the library could be held liable for that. The library is not responsible for any damage to the device, and therefore the staff shouldn't be touching the device. Staff can certainly, with a pencil, point at things and teach their patrons to push on this and type this in and click that, click over here, but they shouldn't be doing the touching themselves. Staff should also not be backing up all the software data and files on the device. They can certainly teach someone how to do it. And the real reason for this is because the library can't make any guarantee of any kind at all regarding the technology assistance provided or the competency of the library staff doing the training. Internet acceptable use policy is very important. It goes right along with your patron behavior policy. So the reason for this policy is that there are certain things that are not allowed to be used. You can't use the internet for, they're illegal. And these could be legal. They're going to, I'm babbling. Use of the internet for illegal purposes is expressly forbidden. Remember that the internet is provided to enhance the library's resources. All computer users and internet users must abide by all state and federal laws. Here we talk about what may not happen. Library patrons may not use the library's wireless network or hard network as well to transmit or receive illegal, including harmful or obscene or disruptive material. Transmit or receive covers illegal downloading. We have had libraries in the past where during off hours, some patrons would park outside the library and illegally download. And those libraries very shortly got contacted by the internet provider, and they're real serious about that. You need to get that taken care of right away, or they will threaten to turn off the internet and won't get it back. It's important to stay in your policy that the library staff member may immediately end a customer's internet session if material is displayed that is inappropriate to a public library setting. Computer users need to abide by all state and federal laws. That means copyright laws, privacy laws, laws related to the unauthorized access or tampering of computers or computer systems and networks, and the Children's Internet Protection Act. Liz, is your hand raised?
Yes, it is. We have a question in chat.
Yes, please.
Michael would like to know, how is disruptive material defined?
Michael, you know it when you see it or when you hear it. I think disruptive material could be if you have speakers, they're playing something really, really loud that's disturbing others' use of the library. It could be they're watching something that is violent, and children can watch that. And while that's not illegal, it's certainly going to be disruptive and probably harmful to those children as well. Any other questions?
I was wondering about the use after hours.
Mm-hmm.
So should we shut the computer, the hotspot off before we leave?
No, you should leave it on. Most of the people here are in communities where there's no other place to get free internet. And this internet's not really free. I mean, people are paying for it somehow. I'm going to stop sharing so we can see the faces. No, that's a question that has been debated for a couple of decades now. A lot of times boards or even librarians thought that the internet or the wireless should be turned off when the library is closed because they didn't want people stealing that internet. Or also that perhaps even if they had wireless, it had to stay within the library and not perhaps expand to the boundaries of the street. They didn't want people stealing the internet. What we look at internet a lot differently now, of course. It's an important service that we provide for our patrons. And so when we provide services for patrons, one of the things we look at is how we can not put barriers between that patron and the service. And so a good example of this is, I'll talk about books because, well, you know, I'm a librarian. It's what we do. If you subscribe to Sports Illustrated and your library gets the swimsuit edition and you put it behind the desk, a patron who wants to look at that has to come to the library and identify what they want. They have to say, I'd like to look at the swimsuit issue of Sports Illustrated. What that does is that puts a barrier between that patron and the information they're looking for. Another barrier to service is overdue fees. There's been a lot of research, and what we find is that overdue fees do not cause people to bring their books back any sooner. What really helps with that is extending the length of the checkout period. A short checkout period and overdue fines, those are barriers to service. And so when we look at the internet, turning it off or just keeping it in the library, those are big barriers to service.
Gail,
Yes.
we have had a few examples of libraries that have gotten the notice from their internet provider saying, we know that at this time a movie was downloaded. What tech can do and Andy can help with is what we did with one library is we had the library post their internet use policy on the window and said,
Yes.
So that we, and say, if this is done again, these MAC
This service
addresses
will be, yeah.
Yeah, so the MAC addresses can be blocked. So it's not turning off the internet for everybody because one person messed up, but you can block MAC addresses. So what the library did is said, we have had an incident of illegal downloading. If it happens again, the MAC address will be blocked.
Right.
So I know you're like, I don't know what a MAC address is. You don't have to know that, but the tech people do, and they know how to, and that's very specific to the device at hand. So it's kind of like the serial number or, your own personal ID. That specific device could be blocked from using the internet.
Right.
Right. I'm a little hesitant about a permanent ban on that,
Right.
but I also don't know how to really police it any other way. You don't want to lose internet for the entire library because one person can't stop downloading movies illegally. So this is what I think is the best option to still provide wireless after hours, but also make sure that patrons are behaving your computer use and internet use policies.
Right. And you mentioned a very important word right at the very beginning, and that was their policy. They had a policy already in place. They didn't need to wait until the next board meeting to write that policy. So because that library director had a policy, they were able to respond and react immediately. Patty.
And speaking of policies, we don't ever want to write one for a one-off situation. The situation that Mary Beth is speaking of, the, for lack of a better word, the offenders were spoken to because there was no one else using the internet in that community.
Very small town.
And so they were identified because they had been into the library, so they knew who they were. It was explained to them what was likely to happen if they continued. But we also don't ever want to write a policy for a one-off situation. So if you already have the policy in place, that's better than having to write something because you want to deal with a newly erupted situation. Right. And we have to remember sometimes it only happens just one time.
Right. And the last two slides of the slideshow are lists of resources. One of the things that I'm very proud of that CCALS does is we push that big red easy button for you. We've got examples of policies on all of these things in Word format, so you never need to start from scratch. These are all going to get uploaded onto the CCALS's information and resource guide. So all you'll need to do is download the policy that you want to adopt and craft it for your library. It, in many instances, is going to be as simple as popping in your library's name and the date that the board approved this policy. We want you to have these policies in place. A lot of them are required by law. They're very helpful to have. Yes, Betty?
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. That's okay. If you've ever used any of the other policies off the CCALS LibGuides, we call them, very easy to do. If you have technology policies in place and you're worried they might need to be touched up, Mary Beth and I are here to help you with that. One of the things we do is called a policy audit. It's better for us if you just send a little bit not, all of your policies. If you were just to send your technology policy, your donation policy, your patron behavior policy, we could touch those up pretty quickly. But what we do is we make sure those are in like a Google Doc or a Word document, and we add comments and suggestions. Sometimes we'll strike things through with red because what you've got is against the law. But we add those recommendations. And then as the library director, you would take that back to the board. And then the board could look at those and make the changes. When I'm training board members, what I always do with them on policies is, especially policies, is say that there are some big decisions that board members have to make. So if there's a new policy and you're seeing it for the first time, it's very rare that that policy should be approved that same night. The way I look at it is it takes 3 meetings. The first meeting is an introduction. If the director is bringing it to you, they're going to tell you why they need this policy. Sometimes they may just say, Gail Santy said we need it. The second policy, the second month is for you to have read it, to have done a little research and to ask lots of questions and get your questions answered. And then at the third meeting, you'll be ready to take action on the policy and approve it because you will have crafted it and you will have localized it. CCALS very much believes in local authority of library boards. You are the governing body of your boards, and you're the ones who are ultimately responsible for making these decisions, but ultimately also responsible for the way the decisions are made by library staff. And so you want to have something in place that's going to guide them. One of my favorite analogies of a library policy is it's sort of like that safety net that at the circus is under those high wire trapeze artists. They're up there doing your business like your library staff is doing theirs. And the policy for the staff is the safety net. And for the high wire trapeze artists, there truly is a safety net there. But that's a good way to look at that. Care and feeding of your library staff, to me, is one of the most important jobs of a board, and having good policies is the best way to do that. That said, the best policies are also developed not just by the board, but with input from the library director and library staff, because they're going to know what's actually going on. How are people using this? Because what you've got described in the policy is not how we do it. All policies should be reviewed every 3 years. What we recommend is you take 1/3 of your policies and review them every year. At my library, we do it the first part of the year. That gives our new board members who come on in June a few months to get their feet under them before we dive into policies, and we review 1/3 of the policies every year. They know that that's on our calendar. It's just something that we always do. It's great. And it really provides great discussions with those new board members. They really learn how the library is operated. What other questions might you have? I know I kind of raced through it. Does everyone have technology policies in your library in place now? No? That's okay. Now you have the tools to get to that. Now, one of the things that can happen, especially with policies and things like internet, is that people will say, oh, that would never happen in our town. Nobody would ever illegally download movies. Or no one would ever watch things they're not supposed to watch on the internet, or no one would ever fill in the blanks. But the truth is that one of the things the internet has brought us, modern technology in general, is they've brought the world into our small towns. When Mary Beth was talking about the town that heard from the internet provider about the illegal downloads, that was a very small town. That's less than 100 people. It happens everywhere. Got a couple of questions in the chat, I think.
Yes, there's one in the chat. Do we have to have our internet policies posted somewhere for patrons to see?
Okay, this is a very good question. The Kansas Public Library standards for 2020 to 2024, so those will be updated soon, give a list of which policies the library should have, and they remind us that these policies need to be available to our patrons. Your policies don't have to be posted all over the walls. There are some policies that said that I would post. If you're able to, I think that acceptable internet behavior is a good one to post. That way there aren't any questions about what's acceptable behavior and what's not. It's right there. But no, there's not really anything that says that you have to put them on the wall. You need to have them in a book that your patrons can easily see. Maribeth?
I was going to add another good way to post your policies is to have them available on the website.
Yes.
So if you have your library policies as a digital file, Word document, PDF, what have you, and you would like that posted on your website, the easiest way to do that is through Google Drive, and you put them all in a folder and then they're there. If you don't know how to do that and would like some help, let me or Michael or Andy know, and we can help you get that set up. And then it's one link to your policies, or you can break them up and do like behavior policies and circulation policies, whatever organizational format you want. We can help you get that set up so that when you make changes to the policy, it's the file that's changing, not the link on the website. That way you don't have to change it in multiple places. You change it once and it's done. The other thing I wanted to add about computer policies, if your library is lacking in this department, where I would focus first is patron use. Make sure that that's clarified. And then internet use and computer use and all those are the three I'd focus on. Following that would then be staff use of social media and staff with patron equipment. And while the technology plan for replacement and budgeting and all that is important, that one you have a little bit of wiggle room. So that would be after you've got all the other ones done.
Absolutely right, Mary Beth. The ones that Mary Beth listed off first all have a lot of liabilities with them if you don't have a policy like this. And so you want to do those first. Patty?
I would make certain that everybody knows where the policies are. We often ask that question when we walk into a library, and there's no printed out copy. They're not sure where they are on the computer. And so anybody who works in the library, whether it be a volunteer or a staff member, should know where those policies are located. And also on your policies, Gail always puts an example. She always puts the date when the policy was reviewed and readopted. And that's really important, because if you've got a 5-year-old policy, one, it helps you know that it's time to look at it again, but it may be completely out of date. And
Right.
so that's a good way to know that.
Right. And when you put that revised year on it, and when we talk about reviewing your policies every 3 years, remember, policies are living, breathing documents. You just don't pick it up and look at it and say, yeah, it's good to go. You want to actually spend some time and work on it. At my library, we have a big binder with all of the policies in there. One of the other things that we do for all of the staff members is that every time the board passes a new policy, every staff member gets a printed out copy, and me, as the director, I make sure to train every staff member on how they're to interpret that policy. And that really helps clarify a lot of things. I thought that I saw Formosa Library had a question. It might have just popped up for me or something.
While you're looking for that, I was just going to say, if you can only find a print version of your policies, don't panic and start retyping them. If you send those to me, I can scan them in and digitize them so that you do not have to retype them. And if you send me printed copy of policies to overview, I'm going to do that anyway, because I edit better with the computer screen. And that way I don't have to do it twice on paper and then on the computer screen. So don't retype them. I have an easy button for you.
And I saw that Formosa said they had no question. I must have been hallucinating or something. I don't know. It's almost my bedtime. We talk a lot about policies. I think that policies are one of the most important things the board does. And policies are written for the patrons and also for your library staff. And if you think of it that way, they're really important for all those interactions that your patrons have with your staff. And one of the places that your patrons interacts with the library is through your website or through your social media. And the staff member might not be present there. Patty? You're not muted. You're muted, dear.
I got a private message from someone who said that they make a picture of their basic computer policy, and that's the screensaver. So you have to see it before you sign in. So
Brilliant.
That's a brilliant thing.
Brilliant.
So,
These policies don't need to be real lengthy, so that's brilliant.
So Gail, back in the dinosaur days of the acceptable use policy, we all had to sign it. Is that
Yes.
still a necessity?
That is true. Back in the days before we could touch those, really, really expensive library computers, we had to sign something that said that we were going to follow the rules and we weren't going to break and we weren't going to reverse engineer and all kinds of things. Computers aren't nearly as expensive as they were then. I don't think it's necessary for patrons to sign it, because just by having the policy and posting it, or in whichever way you're going to make your patrons familiar with it, they're agreeing to abide by the policy. Tell me, what's the most important thing you've learned tonight?
One. This is Liz. I didn't know that you could block MAC addresses. It was pretty cool.
Yeah.
Not the most important thing, but it was interesting to learn.
In the chat,
Osborne?
we have
Mhm.
donations of technology policy.
Yes. Yeah, you just don't want somebody bringing in all their old stuff. I mean, we have to deal with the books. We don't need to deal with computers, which reminds me, Andy, what options do libraries have if they have old technology that needs to be disposed of?
I can recycle it for you. There's a recycling place here in Great Bend, and I'm happy to take it whenever I'm up in your area and get rid of it for you.
Yay.
Another comment in the chat, that we need to review our policies 1/3 at a time, and we need to add some items of concern. So
Yeah,
Good.
I think I will tell you that, I'm the director of the Great Bend Library still for a few more months, and we just added a new policy in March because we found out we needed one. When we were doing our reviewing our insurance policy, they wanted to know if we had a policy for staff use of personal vehicles for work. And we did not. Well, we do now, so we're good to go there.
Gail, is that one on our lib guide?
I don't think it is.
I think that's one we could add as a
Yeah.
sample. It requires the staff to give a copy of their car insurance to the office.
Mhm. And essentially it says that they won't sue the pants off the library if something happens when they're on library business in their own personal vehicle.
So yeah, I will work on getting our lib guide, adding these new ones that we talked about tonight. But go ahead and Michael put that link in the chat. Go ahead and take a look at it and see what's already there. If there's something that you feel is missing, let me know. I'd be happy to update that, because that's a resource for you to use as a template or as a starting point. So if you go there and there's a policy that you're looking for that's not there, ask, because we can find something. Please
Absolutely
please
right.
don't recreate the wheel.
Most of the policies that we post are from big libraries that we've kind of, I wouldn't say dumbed down or toned down. I'm not really sure what the word is, but we've kind of retooled them so they're going to work for all sizes of libraries, and that way they're easier for you then to use. One of the reasons that we borrowed the policies from the big library is because they've most always been vetted by a lawyer. Teresa says the order and importance of technology policies to make sure we have in place. Yes, that was very good. And Ashley says she loves the lib guide. Me too. That was that's an important thing for us to have all those resources in one place. And Danae says, thanks for the easy buttons. Yes. Your time is so valuable and you have so little time. Is there, I don't think there's, Colleen, do you work 40 hours a week? Yeah, I don't think there's hardly anybody here who works 40 hours a week.
I'm at 38.
Yeah, okay, 38. So you don't have time to help your library board write policies from scratch. You just don't. You don't, Patty?
I think the one area regarding technology policies that I had never heard of before I came to CKLS was personal use. And, I've been fortunate enough, I've always been in a management position and I've been given my first laptop came to me in 1995. So, I've had this thing, but it's always been at home with me, and it never even occurred to me to the level of responsibility of taking their computer out. Oh, hi, Maisie. Their computer out of the building to my home. And then also things like, I always used my phone before CKLS. I always use my phone for work. And stuff never occurred to me. So you have really been very enlightening on that, as have the tech staff. Had no ideas.
Great. Let's see, how to write or get around a librarian using their personal phone. Is there a policy out there for that? Karen, I will see what I can dig up. One of the reasons that we don't recommend that librarians use their own phone for work business is because if for whatever reason that phone got subpoenaed, they wouldn't get it back. And that's not something that the library is usually prepared to replace. But it's so convenient. So we will look and see if we can find a policy for that, Karen. Thank you.
This is Patty. At my last library, I was the children's librarian, and I was connected to the military base. So most of the telephone numbers that the students had were long distance numbers, and I wasn't allowed to make long distance calls for children on the library phone. So that's why we were using my phone, because at least they could call, because, you know, they might have an Arizona or a North Carolina phone number.
Mhm.
Karen asked, should there be a stipend for use? Small libraries don't have the ability to have multiple phones.
Right, right. I'm a silent admin on a lot of library pages, and I see that patrons are messaging people all the time on Facebook. Librarians are using their phones for that after hours. Patricia, go ahead. Oh, Punny, you're muted.
That was just what I was going to say. It's a financial issue because we use our phones to notify patrons that our library books are due or that they can come in, because it's a long distance phone call for us if we don't.
Absolutely. Or to let your board members remind them it's the meeting tonight. There's so many reasons we use our phones. So we'll see what we can hunt up on that. Patty, I'd like you to lead us on out with a typical Patty sort of a message for our librarians and trustees who've joined us tonight. And for, excuse me, for all of those of you who will be watching the archive, if you've got any questions, please don't hesitate to contact us. We'll be glad to help you. Go ahead, Patty.
We just want to thank you. We know that your time is precious, and the fact that you brought your boards together tonight to show up and spend the hour with us. One of the things that we do need from all of you is either put in the chat or to email Mary Beth or I who all was attending from your library, so we make sure that you all get credit, because one of those standards that is all important to the CKLS base system grant is making sure that these are trained, and also that library staff get their 6 trainings in a year. So please let us know who was here this evening. Gail always says that the strongest and best volunteers in the state of Kansas are library trustees. We know that your evening time is precious, and you could much rather be out watching your kid play ball, out enjoying playing with your dog, as some of our staff members plan to do as soon as this is over. But we want to thank you for your time. Also, I'm going to throw in a commercial for my favorite CKLS event. Next Wednesday is the first of our 6 Explorer group meetings. Mary Beth described briefly when we started tonight. These meetings are not about CKLS talking to all of you. It's about you talking to each other. We meet in 6 different locations throughout the system. Next week on the 26th, we'll be at the La Crosse High School. And we have the next one will be in May, on May the 10th in Logan, at the Logan Public Library. The whole idea behind these is you get to see a library, get to tour them and know what their library is about. We try to move them around, so it's an easy drive for at least one of those times. We serve you pizza, cookies, and drinks. And it is your hour and a half to get to know each other on a more connective level than you might meet in a workshop. And it also your opportunity to ask each other questions as we explore the questions that matter. Don't forget that we have 2 more days of Tech Week, tomorrow and Thursday at 1:30. Your CKLS team is ready to educate and entertain you for the rest of the week. We again want to thank you for your time, and we appreciate the hard work that you all do for the communities you serve.
And one last thing I would say, talk amongst yourselves as boards. And if there are topics that you would like to see us do in this format for you as boards, you let us know. Hi, Zena. Thank you all for being here tonight.